Thank you, Cynthia, Dr. Cynthia, and thanks all for showing up and coming and being part of this. It's always great, when we can gather as groups, especially where we are right now, where we find ourselves, in this unprecedented time and change. So I'm going to be talking about pain, like who here doesn't have pain? I once went to a meeting with a bunch of other practitioners, and this one therapist stood up and talked, and he was a neuromuscular therapist. And he says, "Well, I have a unique relationship with pain." And I thought that was always a great little introduction, to this. So we're talking about renewal. That's our theme today. So, and I'm not going to be talking about renewing your pain, but what we do want to talk about a little bit is what is that, and I'll be giving some classes on actually how to manage not just pain, but something that's called the pain body. So how many of you have maybe woken up in the morning, maybe not feeling so great, either aches or pains, or maybe you're high one day, next day you wake up and you're just flat. Anybody ever experienced that? Or how about you're doing something during the day and all of a sudden you hear yourself going, that sigh. Sometimes it's a sigh of relief, but what's the relief from? Okay. Or maybe you have physical pain, either all the time or some of the time or occasionally. So these are all instances where you are aware of something being active in what's called your pain body. Now that term was one that was pretty much coined or brought into the world by Eckhart Tolle. And we'll talk about that. I'll define more of that. But what I really wanted to talk about today is the renewal aspect of yourself. And if you're experiencing pain, in my world as a energy medicine practitioner, as someone who works with your energy body, which includes the very thing that you are aware of right now, the physical body. It's much more complete. The physical body is just a part of the overall of you. Well, one of those other parts of you is this thing known as, coined the term, pain body. So, that's something that you may or may not directly relate to, although you can definitely directly relate to having experienced pain in your life. And then how do you go about, what did you do to alleviate that pain? You probably sought out a doctor or a therapist of some sort, whoever you work with, to help alleviate this particular pain. As Dr. Cynthia indicated, whether it's marathon training or whether it's life training, you're going to have experiences at one time or another of pain. Now, pain can occur in many different fields. So we've just been talking about physical pain, but we also know there's emotional pain, and there's even mental pain. So all these are perceived differently. They're all processed by everyone differently. One of the things I wanted to call your attention to is one of the tips I'll be working with, which is, what can you really do about this? I mean, obviously, if you have some kind of physical injury or pain, there are physical things that you can do with it. There are medications sometimes that are taken, or different aspects that you can do to heal the physical. But what is it that you can really do for yourself? And part of that is where I'll be kicking into something that talks about joy. And how does joy, either the abundance of it in your life or the lack of it in your life, affect this? So, has anybody ever heard of the 100 monkey principle? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, for those of you who may not, it was an anthropological and zoological study where there was a population of monkeys on one island, absolutely no connection to another population of the same species. There was no interspecies communication between these two. And once this population here reached 100, on learning how to do a new technique and do something, this other population immediately got it. Okay? No physical connection, hundreds, thousands of miles away from one another, yet they learned the exact same technique once this reached the threshold of 100. Okay? In physics, and quantum physics has now brought this into our alignment, and this is known as entanglement, quantum entanglement. And so we have actually physics and science to talk about this other than the normal sociology or population biology type of statistics. But what I speak to here is something that's known as coherence. So, and another example in physics, how much time do I have?
4 minutes.
So in physics, you're all familiar with a laser. Well, the way a laser works, like if you have a flashlight, you turn a flashlight on, you have a diverse beam of light, the beam is all over the place. Laser, it's a very coherent pinpoint of light. The way it's done is if we can get square root of 1% of those photons to be coherent, all of the photons all at once become coherent. We only need the square root of 1%, okay? So what I would ask you is to consider in you, if you could list all the pains in your life, I bet you could easily come up with 100 pains, okay? If you listed your 100 pains, and if you took 1% of those 100 pains, that's how many? It's 1. And the square root of 1 is, for those of you who are not mathematicians, it's 1. And this means is if we can find one of your pains, one, and we can come to some degree of coherence in joy, all pain will go away. So this is one of the principles that we'll be talking about, we'll be working with. There's many ways of doing this, that you can align and get all your pain body to dissolve, in essence, okay? And we'll even be looking at the question of maybe even whether you want to dissolve the pain body, But one of the what we'll be doing in this class is answering questions like, what is the pain body? What causes the pain body to arise? The science of pain. What is the difference between the pain body and your emotional body? How can we dissolve it? And the practical tools, tips, and techniques for managing your personal pain. So, anyway, any questions about any of this? We're in a season now of, the holiday season, which is all about joy, okay? But it's very interesting, between this holiday packed season, between Thanksgiving to Christmas, there is usually so much stress and pain that is generated. It's surprising, and during this particular time of this unusual pandemic that we're in, there's even some more of that that's been amped up and added to it, mainly because people can't now travel, go visit families, we're doing distancing things. So this has become a very, very real phenomenon. So anyway, I would encourage any of you who are interested to take a look at this, maybe, because I think it would be really, really helpful.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, you gotta raise your hand, but yes. Dr. Cynthia.
Are you seeing this play out clinically? How are you seeing this play out clinically?
You mean with reference to the pandemic, or this in general?
Yeah, and this whole, I love this language of, you just gotta fix one, and then other things will start to spontaneously resolve.
I see it all the time, because when I see a client, even for the very first time, they usually are going to present with a myriad of symptoms. They may mention one, and I'll ask them, what's your main thing? Is it your hip, that you've got hip pain? Is it that you have cancer? Is it that you have Parkinson's disease? Is it, whatever it is. So there's always a chief concern, but what I find is when we work on one piece, all of a sudden the other ones start to line up. It's almost as if there begins a degree of coherency, and not only do they line up, it's almost like they line up. I'm next. I want to be healed too. And so all of that is what happens during that process. So yes, you can begin to do one, and then the others are automatically follow.
Awesome. Sure. Any other questions for Chuck? Okay, cool. We promised that we would keep the presentations short, so you would have time to get up and take advantage of the healing sessions. And we have another little